I talked to Kevin yesterday because I want to try to find a good place to start. So the place I'm going to start is exactly where you started. I'm like, dude, we got to go to the beginning. So, because I'm hoping you're like Kevin, where you actually have a memory, unlike me, because I don't seem to remember things very well.
Less than I used to, but yes.
We met. You said it was either 2015 or 16.
Yeah, because it was I was still working at Bush's. It might have been 2014 because it was right before I got my real job at Schaefer's.
Yeah.
I had just graduated, so it was either 2014 late, the year I graduated, or 2015 early to mid.
Okay. Fuck, I don't know. I
I
wish
don't,
I could.
Because when we met, it was like we didn't really like associate like that we were cousins at all. So we were just kind of like, this is a fucking guy I work with. I happen to have some proclivities with.
Yeah, I guess I'm related to him. I don't know.
It's weird.
We don't look anything similar, but whatever. I guess his family is very watery.
Yeah. Turns out all of us are whores and not very discriminate.
Right. Yeah. I was curious about, because I can't recall me ever mentioning the book to you. Because I thought, you know what I mean? Like, do you remember me ever talking about it? And you're like, huh.
So I think, if I remember properly, don't quote me on this. The part I don't remember exactly is I think it was passively mentioned before, but I think when we really started like talking about it was the time I quit Schaefer's, came back, and we were on midnight shift.
Yes, this is what I remember.
And that's when we would just talk about shit for hours because we weren't doing our fucking jobs at all. So we would just fucking sit and wander through the aisleways. And at one point you mentioned the book, and I started rattling off ideas. And you mentioned what the thing that I remember hooking on to is at some point you mentioned a character named Aya, and she had a guardian named Alistair. Mm-hmm. But you would run out, like you had no fucking clue what to do with him. And I was like, yeah, I bet I could make something up for that guy.
Yeah. Yep. And it's interesting that you picked up on Alistair, at the time his name was Alistair, is because that was Kevin's character. And Kevin kind of walked away from him. And at that point I wasn't really talking to Kevin because he was off and doing stuff. And I'd keep in touch with him on the telephone. During that time, because I don't remember if he was in North Carolina or if he was in Philly, he was just kind of all around the fucking United States because it's Kevin.
Yep.
And he was just doing stuff, and he really just walked away from the story of Alistair. And I just remember I was like, well, I know what he's going to be and all this stuff, and that apparently that's where you picked up. And it's interesting that you took him and said, well, he's not a Naku, and he doesn't live over in Vass anymore. He's actually a southerner. Like, it was interesting that he just kind of went, no, I'm down here. I don't live in the forest anymore.
Yeah. But I kind of, like, it stuck to me that he was a guardian, but I was like, if this character is going to mean anything, he can't be because Aya is a secondary element to Eris, at least in my perception at the time. Aya was a secondary element to Eris. Mm-hmm. Just by merit of Eris is the main character. It's a male perspective book. Eris is the main character. Aya is relevant through his eyes as it's kind of being described. And if Alistair is only relevant through Aya's eyes, then his eventual connection to her is non-existent.
Okay, yeah.
So for him to matter, his guardianship has to be voluntary, not compulsive. Mm-hmm. And in that case, he couldn't be an Anaku because at that point I was conceptualizing them as sort of a natural automaton.
Okay. Which essentially you wouldn't be too wrong in saying that. But it is very interesting now that I think about it, because I don't notice these things, that he's kind of kept that status though, as a guardian. Like, yes. You like kind of made that a part of his character, that you didn't say, well, I'm just going to kind of abandon everything and build him from the ground up. You kept the idea that he's some sort of guardsman, he's some sort of, whatever the word would make sense. I'd never noticed that you kept that idea of Alistair, that's his job. He protects people for whatever reason.
Yes, he becomes a Southern champion, and his entire goal, even though he gets kind of kicked wayward by his own lack of emotional intelligence, the entire motivation and the entire pull on that is the notion that he is supposed to protect his friends, and eventually, as he kind of loses his shit, becomes a champion of mankind.
Right.
He's looking out for them. And that eventually leads him to a sense of like peace and self-sacrifice as he gets to the time where Sane is doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that mid to late stage of his development is that pulling him towards kind of an anger and a distraughtness over a sense that he is failing.
Right. You know, so the thing too I notice is, well, my question would be leading into this would like, clearly when you were growing up, you attached to stories that were revolved around either games or like just fantasy sci-fi in general is like a big old envelope.
Yeah.
You really identify with that.
And then there's the crossover of like 40K, which is or sci-fi pretending.
Yeah.
Or fantasy pretending to be sci-fi.
And you found that stuff. Halo, I remember you talking about. Clearly you like Star Wars Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
It's an obvious thing if you're into this stuff. But you kind of, you have skills in that though. Interestingly, where you I wouldn't call it pick apart, but you definitely have an ability to identify story elements of like, well, characters got to go through this thing, or like troubleshooting, like, well, if he's part of a guild, then what does this guild believe? And about like, you found ways, and you have a huge encyclopedia of like all the things you like, and just said, well, fucking Mass Effect, this is happening, or whatever it is. Like you seem to kind of find ways to just look at the world around you and what other people created and find ways to implement the book. So when this started to kind of happen, do you remember what it really was for you that you said, you know, I kind of want to do this? Because did I ask you? Did you offer? Did we mutually was it just happen naturally? Do you remember what made you think, fuck, I kind of want to do whatever this is?
I think it was one of those days we were sitting out on the salt pallets out in front of the store. We were talking. You said something about Alistair, and I just started throwing out a shit ton of what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did what if, and for like an hour and a half, we just
that sounds familiar.
Kept riffing on Alistair, and you were like, do you want to help me write the book?
Okay, I did offer, all right.
And it was after an hour and a half of me just involuntarily word vomiting ideas about this guy.
Mm.
And it's kind of hard to judge. Like, on one hand, I wanted to hang out just explicitly because I don't really have a connection to the rest of the Baker family, so we're like the last
Weird
two of our generation. Yeah. So that was definitely an element. But also, it was immediately... I used to write a lot in high school, and I'm not good at writing. But I'm really into characters.
Yeah, that's like...
And so it was like a really good, focused way for me to express things through that character, Alistair.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the legwork for the setting was already in place. So I just kind of had to draw lines in the icing, not necessarily bake the cake.
Okay.
And that made it, I guess, plausible. When I had to write outside of characters in high school, it was dog shit. I had no idea how to... I can tie things together that are already floating on the surface. I can't make up.
Like seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to put you over here now, how are you going to get there kind of stuff.
Yep. At least it's never been a developed skill for me. So to just have Alistair and to be able to go, what is realistic or reasonable for this character in this time and place to be where, and you to be like, this. I'd be like, okay, fuck. Now I know what this character would be thinking, because now he's on that predefined set path.
Okay.
You know, I can't... A good way to think about this is video games. If you hand me Minecraft, I get overwhelmed quick.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But if you hand me Mountain Blade, which feels like it has a lot more options, is a lot more open than Minecraft, but it's really not. There's a set of systems in place. There's a few ways you can go, but
there's something linear that you really kind of
Yep, maybe a multitude of linears, but a linear to follow.
Okay.
And that was, I guess, what made Alistair possible for me. I'm not creative enough to build a mansion on Minecraft. I am creative enough to give a character a reason to want to be a lord.
But you also have an ability within, like, I guess, the gaming sphere of, oh gosh, I wouldn't call it like settlement building, but all that, but creating infrastructure when it comes to a story. Because, like, you clearly, like, for me, I want to enjoy playing Stellaris, or just you name any game that belongs in that genre.
Yep.
I want to love those games, but I always feel just so overwhelmed. I'm like, this is too much. I don't want to have this much fucking to do. I'm okay with give me a few tasks and then I'll okay everyone's ideas, but when it comes to, like, I have a really hard time with that, but you seem to have a really good, not only with just understanding, like, how can I take this character and put him somewhere, you can actually, if you are put in a system, you flourish.
Yes.
So, like, that's kind of what the linear character telling is, like, if I say you're Alistar and you're like, well, now what? I'm like, and this is what you should do, this is what you don't like, and then you are able to find ways, like, okay, now I have the rules, I have the guidelines. You also can do that when it comes to empire building, essentially, or just building concepts inside of a community or of a consciousness, and that seems to be one of your abilities that you have.
I think it's, for me, settings are like a language template or like a form of basic math. So Alistair in space is different than Alistair in a fantasy setting with magic. Those two characters really, if you took the exact same characters, the amount that those two guys have in common dwindles as time goes on.
Yeah.
So with a setting and a series of important places, and like at the time that southern stretch below Dubois existed, it wasn't labeled the Southern Kingdoms at the time, but that place existed. With all of those things in place, from there I've got it.
Right.
Because what could exist on that southern continent in a setting where we're dealing with, a Germanic culture going through its renaissance of technology, a Grecian culture that didn't collapse and is sort of following.
Yeah.
Dubois is like a smidge behind, but they have Napoleonic aspirations. And then you've got Lyria and the Empire, who it's not like they're technologically behind, but it's like they're foregoing it in favor of their traditional Romanisms.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, this gives me a spectrum and I guess an acceptable boundary where, like, okay, so I can go a little bit further back and a little bit further ahead and it not be insane.
Right. Yeah.
So what if I made these guys some sort of tribal pseudo-Saracen and tribal pseudo-Celtic group that found a sort of way to keep to their old methods without radically losing effectiveness with this changing world. So there's certain things these guys had to suck at to make sense in the setting. And that's really what it was. The setting defined reality, and I had a reality to work within. Okay. From zero, you tell me to define the technological boundaries of people on a planet, and I'm like, well, the real world has Apache helicopters and tribals. Yeah, so, and that's just not conducive to good story making, because nobody wants to read about a slaughter over and over and over again.
That's true.
The real world is not that interesting of a story. It's got its good moments, but day to day, give me a full list of the military actions of the United States. Well, we were a hero like twice in our history, but for the most part, we bomb farmers. That's just not that fun to read.
Yeah. Don't you like the intrigue of it all?
And it's all got to be informed by the real world. That's writing that isn't is just jargon. At least it needs to at least have philosophy put into it.
Of course, mythology, philosophy, and all that. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to capture. Kind of second book, third book when we originally planned it. Kind of mid to late Southerners this is a bunch of well-intentioned, total fucking barbarians. America.
Yeah.
Well-intentioned barbarians. When you look at the rest of the world, we're not civilized compared to them. And we have delusions of grandeur. And I was like, but what if I can take that concept? Because we have this big fucking empire. We do these bad things,
Mm.
but day to day, I believe we see ourselves as democratic crusaders.
Yeah.
And we're kind of lost to the fact that we're not anymore. What if some stronger element of that was still very true?
Exploring an idea, yeah.
Yep. So what if the federal government, what if we didn't live under just a raw oligarchy? What if the voice of the people still meant something? What if we had gotten here sooner and learned to live with the people who were here? What is this what does the perfect version of this country look like in my 2023 or 2017 or whenever fucking progressive, generally uneducated brain?
Right.
What does it look like to that guy? So I made that up to the best of my ability with influence from things I think are neat, which is it was heavily influenced by my perspectives of Saladin at the time.
Yeah.
The Crusaders already existed, the Masonic Knights, and I went, okay, so that concept's taken. So what if we took Saladin and reconciled the concept of, that Golden Age Islamic defender with the Christian warriors he fought, and I tried to kind of find a halfway point between their images to make up the vibe of the Southern warrior.
Mm.
And then I made that Southern warrior the ideal of those people.
At what point? Okay, maybe not at what point. I should say where's that double check? When it comes to what so I'll have two questions, and I always have that thing where I'll do this and I'll forget. But my two questions would be, what do you see your role is, and how has it evolved? Just in your perspective, just yours, not what I say or what you feel that I think or Kevin thinks. What from beginning to now, what do you think your role is? And then kind of second to that, I'll try to hold to that one actually. So what do you think your role is when it comes to the book? At its beginning, you wanted to just help out. You were just doing this and that, but then you found like, oh, this is kind of enjoyable. But then you were trying to like create these people, and you're like, I gotta make them different. You looked at the world around you, and you try to establish something. But at what point in that, like, did you start to see you had a role in this?
One thing I noticed, or the thing I felt I did good, is I have some detachment from the story passively because I have so many lores in my head. I'm able to put this in just a folder with a bunch of other information. So I'm able to contrast it with other things, and every time you come to a boulder in the road in the development of the story, I'm able to just be dynamite.
Yeah, honestly.
It's messy, and you usually hate half of it, and it just, boom, there you go, deal with that.
Okay, yeah.
That was, second book, Alistair is kind of on this death march to Lyria and the Empire. Kind of, he's lost his shit. He's no longer really a good guy in the story at that point in time. And Eris has matured. He's had children. He's kind of found peace and wisdom, and he's at that point in the story is, what is he supposed to do? He's kind of reached a finality. And when he tries to stop Alistair, that is that finality coming to a head, and it only made sense, for example, right there, that he knows he's not going to survive that encounter. Because he's already done everything that matters. Stopping Alistair is a transitory. It's even if he succeeds, it doesn't mean much.
Right.
Nothing really is going to change. So in my head, what he's doing there, he's not really trying to stop Alistair. He's trying to be a footnote in his brain somewhere, give him a chance to make the right choice later, because he's not going to now.
Right.
a kind of a thing he can regret that he can also forgive himself for someday. And that's more or less how I view pretty much my entire role in the story. That's a lot of how the South has developed has been to... They've been developed in such a way that they're a bunch of fucking tribals who have developed a good society who's trying to keep an eye on the world and keep a grip on their place in it.
Right.
And that's kind of how I try to act in the story too, which is what's happening, what needs to happen, how do we make that happen?
Right.
Which is why the Southerners, as you can see through their entire development, they pick sides. They have their, like a Drana is much like you, it's neutral. It needs things to move, but it's not like all of this really, really matters.
Yeah.
The South hardline picks sides.
Right.
They're not quite exterminators, they're not supremacists, they're not conquerors, but they distinctly want certain things kept in line.
Right.
If the Inaku get too strong, no more mankind. The Inaku are all over the fucking place.
Right.
So the Inaku need to be kept down to a certain degree. If Tantorum gets too strong, then why isn't the whole story about Tantorum?
Right.
Because they're like, if the South is the American progressive ideal, Tantorum is the American traditional ideal.
And it's beautiful that that's what there's a division between them historically.
Yep. Which is why they, when push comes to shove and the whole of mankind is threatened, they're on the same team, because they don't really... you can't really separate them in that concept that these are the two nations of mankind really on this map. And this is how these groups view the outside world. That's just reality. Unfortunately, the likelihood of even the progressive American ideal siding with what one could conceptualize as foreign element as Mongolia or China or India or, the far Middle East or any of that. Those guys have ideas that Southerners like in this book. They trade, we communicate, all that, but when push comes to shove, they've always backed Tantorum in means of mutual safety. On the political side, that's just been my analysis of reality.
Right.
This comes back to World War II. Communist Party had record numbers of people joining the army. And it's just, when push came to shove, this was this threat that we perceived. All of a sudden, we were all friends for a second.
Right. What do you think is the goal for yourself in this? And then obviously what you think the goal is for the actual object, which is, I call it the book, but it feels way bigger than that, but we just call it the book.
Yeah.
What do you think the goal is in general for yourself in this, and what do you think the goal is in your mind? You know what I mean? Not like what you think we should think.
I think it's a very good kind of grounded way to process the reality of your experiences. It asks certain questions that I think those questions are tied to feelings, maybe just as a modern person, but ones that I feel are very real on the political, spiritual, and personal level. So, political level, you have the American ideal, the traditional, and the progressive. Because ideally with the South, their whole thing is fuck off, we just want peace. If everybody can... if we can not be a threat to the world and the world cannot be a threat to us, that's what we want. The traditional American ideal of peace is when there's no borders. It's very Roman. You have, I guess, a smattering of foreign ideals there. If you just fully don't identify with the way of life as we really experience it right now at all, you're looking for something entirely outside of that. There's options for that. There's the super noble, honorable Dubois. There's the, I guess, kind of peaceful Oriental wisdom, Lyria.
Mm-hmm.
There's this. The Empire are always viewed as overly artistic. We haven't talked about him much, but I viewed him as very aloof.
Yeah.
Very like, it's just we were, now we're not, and we're just trying to keep some grip on things, and that's just the way things go, man.
Yeah, kind of.
And then there's Adrana, which is similarly aloof, but very mystically inclined. Very secret of the universe matters. They're less material.
Right.
On the spiritual level, there's, like, let's just be real, this book is pagan as fuck.
It really is.
I
know.
There's different levels of, like, are your guiding spirits, are they heavenly? Are they earthly? Are they more or less irrelevant to you? Is it a guiding conscience? Or is everything just doing what it does? If there is a guiding conscience, do you believe it gives a shit about you? If it does, can it even do anything about it?
Honestly, yeah.
And I feel like that's a very good thing to express, because there's not in modern America a whole lot of space for deviated thought in terms of, like, comforting discussing structures. It's pretty much, you can think what you want, but in a small town like Tecumseh, you got a bunch of people who, you say one thing weird and they go, but Jesus loves you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that's not the point, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I said, other spaces, you might find the exact opposite. There isn't a whole lot of what-if space in our culture.
Right, yeah.
There isn't a whole lot of fun for thought, or just, sometimes I feel this way. That's kind of like the only place I found I was able to safely express that is in my, like, very personal relationships in life and in the book.
Yeah.
Where I can be like, maybe God exists, but maybe he's fucked too. Maybe he can't help us.
That's the whole premise of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe even if he could, maybe he wouldn't care. Maybe we're not that significant to him.
Yeah. Again, that's the book. I think that's why we've had this kinship, because, not only because of kinship, but we have similar views. We just come at it from different angles.
Yeah.
And with different experiences. Like, we're talking about the same fucking bag in the ground there, but you're sitting on that side. You don't see what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? But we both agree to it. And the elements of the Whisper, or the Forgotten King, or Thies, and Dove, and all this shit, we both agree on what they are, what they stand for. We had to work out, like, the little logistics of the story so we're on the same fucking page, we don't get confused. But essentially, the Whisper is just an object that exists outside of time and space that is perceived to be a creator. And the whole reason that everything matters is because he wants to make everything go away, because that's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
It's going a roundabout way because he's not omnipotent like a god. And he doesn't have these godlike powers, so he has to act through this world that he can never enter because Dove is not trapped. We're just exploring the same thing. It's just like, what if a creator isn't exactly... What if he was created? And what if, because he was created, he, like, the gatekeeper to the unknown is what the Whisper is. We've talked about him as the Grim Reaper is a great example. We've said that he is the embodiment of fear, which is very true in both cases. But the thing I like about, with what you see too, is the ability to, like, that exactly. What if God doesn't give a shit? What if the gods that we've heard about are a part of a pantheon? And what if they're lesser beings than something higher, and they're just like, oh shit.
He's gonna get upset when he sees this.
What did you tell fucking that guy to do? Like, well, I flooded it here, and I didn't know it wasn't supposed to. We both
told these guys if they die in battle, they go to heaven. What do you want from me?
But then he said something different. Well, this guy's telling them to fucking meditate. We both agree.
Dude, these assholes mashed their religions together, and now you have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. But that's what we're doing, is we're essentially exploring human thoughts on what they think something beyond us thinks. And it's amazing to think that we know that. Like, that we could ever fathom, like, well, God said this, and he meant that. course you could believe that, but what we're doing is questioning. Like, we can't just say what we think something beyond us thinks is correct. You have to be able to think the other way too.
Yeah.
And
And I like the little smidge of hope in the book that's like there'll be answers.
mhm.
It's all worth it. It sucks. Nobody's gonna be right, but it's all worth trying.
Yeah, this is all meant to happen as it's supposed to. And that's what I think in the years that we've been doing it. I don't know how many years it's been since you've been apart. So 2014, 15. Let's just round up to 15. How many years ago was that? 7, 8?
8.
8 years. And Kevin's been apart for 11. That's so crazy to think about, but that it's been happening that long. But I feel it. You know, like even physically. Remember when we would just look to the wild north and be like, yeah,
It's a place.
what's there? Giants, maybe?
Yeah.
But there was that point in our life. Like, look at fucking, what is Sapernia, what was once called Etrovia, whatever you want to call it. It's just a blank place with the rivers and a little lake. Like, we're just like, what's there? I don't know. The Empire? Who's the Empire? Somebody.
Picture Romans but blue.
Yeah. And Kevin's like, how about we call him Etrovia? Sure, that sounds great. Let's call him Etrovia now.
Love it.
But the beauty of it is what you add, for me at least, is you add the same very thing that I feel like I am too. And that's why I will always go to you when I'm stuck. Because I'm like, I feel like I'm never going to be like, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do here. And you're going to be like, why don't you just, and you tell me something I hate. You're just like, yeah, you should just like, make them all Asians. And then maybe the whole world's upside down here.
Well,
like,
in Bushido.
Yeah, you don't tell me that stuff. You're always like saying something like, fuck, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't it? And it's never failed. You know what I mean? We've gone through iterations. We've gone through different phases. We tried stories out, and I confuse you guys all the time because you're like, I thought this was happening. I'm like, yeah, me too, but it's not anymore. And that's happened a lot. I know it. It's been 8 years. I know it's been happening all the time.
The book dictates.
We don't know what we're doing. But for you, do you think... So you talked about the importance of the physical part and then the spiritual part. There was another part too that you said that it really touches on for you.
The emotional aspect. There's a lot of characters so far to follow, and they have very different expressions of what's happening to them. Mm-hmm. And I feel that that's important because it's kind of like with Star Wars, man, that there's a point in time where a lot of people really identified with Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And part of it is, it's just like Anakin wasn't ever a bad guy.
Uh-huh.
It's just that life got fucked up. And we're in a time and place specifically in history right now. People like the prequels sucked. Why do people like the prequels? Because that character makes sense to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Probably still being born right now will continue to make sense to them. That didn't necessarily to older generations, because right now, like 40 years ago, dude, the shit our dads could get away with in terms of like the social sphere, the dating sphere, the work sphere, radically different. Mm-hmm. Radically different. We live as men in a higher standard world now.
Yeah, and honestly, if you think about it, just like when it comes to the understanding of like Darth Vader, old school Darth Vader, he is just Darth Vader. That's the black and white. It's so easy.
Yep.
Whereas the prequels kind of shaped our minds into like, you can fall. You can have
This is a dude just doing his best, and it got fucked up. He did his best, but he's got problems. He doesn't necessarily know how to deal with them, and no matter what, that's always going to fall back on him. And at some point, it made him very upset, and he stopped trying to be good for a minute.
Yeah.
And that, I feel, that's a feeling that makes a lot of sense to people born in a place where it's like, my actions have consequences. Mm-hmm. And you actually have to struggle for things. And people don't just accept you. You don't just get to do what you want.
Yeah.
So then to see Darth Vader redeemed, one, is very heartening for the people who identify with him. But on top of that, for, like, we're in that time now where we're probably representing the middle age group of people who really like that guy.
Yeah.
To see that his kid did better than he did is like a very hopeful thing. Yeah. That his kid wasn't nearly as fucked up as he was, and that he was able to adapt to the changing reality much better.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, like,
his mother's in him.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so like maybe I struggled to be a decent human being in this world, and it took me a minute to figure it out. But I got there, and now that I'm there, maybe now when I have a kid, it's not going to be, holy shit, all men forever are going to have to go through this thing, and all women forever are going to have to deal with people like the person I was.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just going to be better on the next round. Maybe my son's going to be a better person and my daughter's going to run into better people.
Yeah.
And the book has that same thing for me.
Yeah.
Eris is a person who was able to find kind of a strong peace and a strong finality about the world, despite how hopeless and powerless he felt in it.
Mm-hmm.
Alistair is a person who was able to eventually get control of his anger and his negative feelings and his need to withdraw and say, no, I'm taking a stand that matters, but I'm doing it in a way that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to make that call with just me on the line.
I can do that. Yeah.
And Vathia is a person who feels like he's lost the entire world as he knows it. He doesn't understand things, and eventually is able to kind of make peace and find a place within it, and rather than say, oh, fucking everybody's evil,
mm-hmm.
he's able to go, no, everybody's just learning.
Yeah.
And everything's just changing, and there's no good way around that, but it's the job of strong men like me to make it easier.
Yeah. You can kind of see the human the human evolution of like stages of life you can go through, or stages of acceptance of the world around you. Some people are really more gung-ho on changing it. Some people are more gung-ho on ignoring it or trying to camouflage themselves within it, you know? I don't think we really ever like purposefully sat down and said, okay, philosophy of mankind, what is it going to be? It just kind of happened that way, and I would believe that it would be because we opened ourselves up to the world around us, whether it's like other fantasies or mythologies or like real life religion and history. We allowed ourselves to look at things and say, you know, what was the pitfall of that? What was the downfall? Why did that work for a while? Like we explored those like individually. You know what I mean? Like we all looked into things in history and said like, well, shit, that almost worked. Why did that almost work? But it didn't. And we allowed ourselves, like, think of what you attach yourself to, like with communism.
Yep.
There was something in there that you were like, this makes the most sense to me, and it can be done right. A lot of people didn't do it right, but that doesn't make it wrong. Like you were able to see through it, whereas like someone else would see it as ultimately whatever, you know, like
evil, a failed venture, fucking
yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Like we're bringing into this book our perceptions of reality, like or at least like how we choose to see everything that happens around us, even if we're not directly influenced by it. You know what I mean? Like let's be honest, like, you know, anything that happened in Nazi Germany in 1932 has some sort of impact on us, but it's so very weak.
Yeah.
Us individually. But we allow the idea of, okay, well, let's look at that and let's make sure that we understand the layers of this. Like for me, for instance, my goal was always, I want to like see how far can a man go down. How does he rationalize his existence? Why does he choose to do what he does? Like, you know, or I'll look at someone that does something evil. I'm like, but like I don't just curse it. I'm just like, I want to know exactly why he's doing it, and why do we deem that as evil? What does he deem as right and wrong, and why does he do that? Let's go back to his childhood and see.
And does this guy even believe he's good, or does he just believe he's necessary?
Exactly. And that's what I've always done, whereas some people will do it differently. They'll, you know, some people are just quick to judge, and that's fine. You know, that's fear-based. But I think that between me, you, and Kevin, we allowed ourselves to explore these things that, I mean, let's be honest, not a lot of people really want to talk about, or they're uncomfortable, or they're weird, or they're fucked up. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever it is, like insensitive, if you will.
I think oddly enough, you, me, and Kevin have all had experiences that kind of, I want to say pre-registered, because the book is nowhere near as strenuous as some of the shit we've gone through. You've suffered miscarriages, he's seen friends die, and I'm the weakest out of the three. I just had a really bad acid trip where I saw purgatory once. But these were events in our life that made us go, shit's already scary. Acknowledge it or not. Like, you don't have a choice. Here it is, smacks you in the face. So now asking these questions is much easier because I think we went through those things, and like I've even seen a bit of this from your recordings with Billy, and the way he talks about it. When you're hit with that scary question, you have a way you can choose to go about it. I know there's not necessarily like to mean a right or a wrong way or any spectrum of such thing, but there's just, you have to pick a direction to go.
Yeah.
Because you can't sit there and do nothing. It'll kill you.
Yeah.
So I think that happened, and we're just expressing what we're already doing because of those things. I said I booked for me, like that bad acid trip was probably the single worst experience of my life so far.
Yeah, I know.
And coming out of that, there's about 3 or 4 months there where I just couldn't even think straight. I was terrified for my life, and coming down from that and like getting used to like the constant visual nonsense I was experiencing and all that was creatively eye-opening.
Yeah.
Was like a big part of, like, I never started talking about the cults of the South, the spiritual part, until I had that bad trip, and I went, okay, my true concept of religion, now that I've had my own experience, is radically different than what I was predisposed to and raised with.
Would you say that the word sobering comes to mind? I know that it's literally the opposite, but in your existence, your eyes, how you see, how you view, and the entire trip that you've experienced, not just that one, but your life, would you say that that was actually the biggest fear of it was so sobering to you?
Yes.
That's probably what was fearful.
That was the hardest thing to process, was I had to make a choice as to whether or not I told myself all of this is not real, it's just a drug, or all of this is painfully real and this is reality.
You're viewing it through a lens that is a little distorted because you're high, but at the same time it's telling you things and giving you metaphors for what is true.
Yeah, and I can like the exact events. And it was weird because like it's factually nowhere near as strenuous or traumatic as like dealing with death, but when Grandpa Baker died,
yeah,
right, that was before I met you. That's the only member of the family I got along with. You know, I love my parents, but I'm the first kid. I'm the trouble kid. Grandpa Baker, who was ultimately not a great person, but he just liked me as me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only member that. And when he died, dude, it was like a day where everything sucked.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't. It was easier to deal with than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
That bad acid trip fucked me up for 4 months. And I guess it's because early on, our family deals with death kind of like plainly. We're never really covered from it. But like, I guess peeking to the other side, so to speak, that was truly earth-shattering.
Yeah.
I remember because I kept seeing, I would close my eyes and I kept seeing shit. Couldn't sleep. It was like fucking 6 a.m.
Yeah.
After that whole thing. I'm just sitting there and I keep seeing horrible, scary shit. Just monsters and all sorts of nonsense. Some of them are permanently fucking in there. Little babies walking towards me on the floor, looking like porcelain dolls with fucking white eyes. Just freaky shit. Seeing like woman with the neck of a snake peeking through the doorway. Just terrifying, otherworldly nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And the point at which it all finally like stopped was I was sitting there and I finally decided to close my eyes and just like I was just huddled up into a ball. At this point, I don't know anything about like anxiety or keeping myself calm because I'd never dealt with any of it before. I'd been very emotionally muted up to that point, which I'm sure you saw some of.
We all have it, yeah.
And I remember waking up in a field of ashes with purple obelisks sticking out of the ground, pointing towards the sky, and the sky was black. Just black. And these obelisks, they were like a kind of like a black stone, kind of like an onyx stone, but they were glowing purple. I could see it on kind of like the sheen of the stone and reflecting off of each other. And just sitting there going, no, this is the other side.
Yeah.
This is what's actually waiting on the other side. Like, you've talked about astral projection and certain psychoactive practices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the one time I did anything in that category and I fucking flung myself all the way to another place. Mm-hmm. And I was just sitting there like, this is the least comfortable and the most reassured I've ever been in my entire life right now.
What is that?
Because it didn't suck. It was the other side, and it's not what you wanted to see, but it wasn't bad.
Was the earthly part of you scared, but the ethereal part of you wasn't, kind of thing?
Yeah. Where I was like, I don't know what's happening, but for everything else I've been seeing around me up to this point, this is... If this is the other side, we did okay. Because this is something to work with.
Yeah.
And the only thing I regret is not trying to look at those stones better. Not walking up to them and shit. Trying to figure out what was actually going on there. I just sat.
I remember you talking about that. I didn't realize how much it really affected you. But then again, when you were talking about it, I could, looking back in hindsight, you were still processing it.
I was shaky dog syndrome at that point.
Because you would talk about it, but when you were talking about it, there was a lot more fear. Whereas clearly now you were able to, like, as well as you can up to that point, process it and kind of look at it objectively and realize without the fear. Because how you explain it, I mean, not only is it very interesting, but it shares so many interesting little elements that you read in mythology. So you know Joseph Campbell, I'm assuming.
Vaguely.
So you know Carl Jung.
Yep.
And you know what his whole dealio was, right?
Yep.
The collective unconscious and stuff like that, and Freud. Like, they were all kind of these guys that were trying to figure us out, right? You call them philosophers, you call them whatever the hell you want. Joseph Campbell, kind of alongside of Carl Jung, had some elements of this. And what his big thing was, he said, man, let's look at, he loves mythology. He just loves storytelling. He loves all that stuff. He decided to really hone in on everything he knew, and he realized, wow, it's all so similar. All this philosophy is so similar. All these mythologies, there's levels to this. They're all talking about the same thing. And he believed in his idea as we tell stories and we tell mythologies to help us make it through this world, much like our book. That's all our book is a mythology. It's just we're explaining our way through it. There's pitfalls, there's stories, there's lessons, there's a lot of things encompassing in it, and mythology will tell you that. Like Archimedes, or you talk about the story of the guy who tried to betray Zeus. There are elements to that. The guy that had the problem, there's a lot of Indian stories, and I don't remember names, so I'm not going to go off on that. They got the navel, and out of his navel is the flower, and that's the universe. Crazy things, right? Joseph Campbell realized that they're all so similar, and he believed, like Carl Jung, that was their collective unconscious. that we all have a shared experience, and we're all telling these stories based on some shared experience. Whereas I'll kind of jump in, and I wouldn't consider myself of their level, but I would say, yeah, that's why the flood, it happened in almost all these major stories, because it probably did happen. How we look at the pantheon of gods, whether you look at it through the lens of Judaism, or like how the Romans or the Celts, like they're all the same people, just looked at differently. You know, all these stories really happened. All these stories really tell us a truth. And your trip like that follows that mythology of what life really is. And what you said, I bet if we just like went onto mythology.org, if that ever existed, and just typed it in, we'd find 50 or 60 different stories that it's similar to.
As you feel with purple stones, where it at?
Because it means something. And our minds work when it is like we have a level of reality that's almost like a fucking filter. Yes, reality. But stuff like that, we're like, oh, it's like a dream. It doesn't make sense. There is no right or wrong. You know, like in the dream world, that's happening, but it's all based on shit that you already kind of know, and it follows a little bit of some logic. But when it can, it can't. It's clear. You're like, okay, this is a dream.
You're looking in the mirror and you're like, that ain't right.
I can't fly. No, it feels like I can in the dream, but I know I can't fly. It's impossible. So, with what you experienced, almost like a synthetic ride to it, you just got an express ticket.
Yeah.
And it's like, because that's why it was so scary, is because it's like, do you want to like get there 1,000 miles an hour, or do you want to slowly get there over 50 years? That was probably one of those moments where it's like, I just want to jump up there and see. That's because the humans were attached to psychedelics. It's been a part of our culture probably since the fucking beginning.
Yep.
He's like, he got fucked up, dude. And he saw crazy stuff. I would say that your story follows that idea, what Joseph Campbell explained and what he looked into. I'll send you some videos of his where he physically talks about these things. But just hearing about, you know, your life journey, your trip, no pun intended, is definitely, you're starting to etch into that life. And that's all telling you stuff. Like the eyes, the thousands, if not millions of eyes you explained.
Yep.
That is something that you truly feel. Like something in you is like, I feel like all these eyes on me. I feel like I'm having to be this. I have to be that. I'm not accepted being this. So I feel like I have to pretend to be something else so I can get that acceptance. Like there's gotta, and I'm not saying that is it, but it could be. There's gotta be a lot of things that are wrapped up into these metaphors. And that's the mythology. Those obelisks, that realm. Is it real? Did you really go there? Possibly. But what does it mean? What does that really mean? What is the obelisk? You know what I mean? Like, why didn't I touch it? Why was it different than maybe I felt? There's a truth to it, and that truth will unlock something in your life.
Yeah, it's been weird.
And you've been trying to figure that out ever since.
Yep. Still see the eyes sometimes. Not quite scared of them anymore. I think that was my biggest fuck up, is I got scared.
Yeah. I've never done anything like that, so I would not. Because I always thought I'd be that guy that's like, I'm going to be the one guy that's going to turn to Brian Wilson. I'm just going to like flip, and then they're just going to... He doesn't talk much anymore. You know? I don't want that.
When he does, he's talking about weird shaped squirrels.
Yeah.
No, it's weird. It's real fucking weird. It's also part of the way this has changed my life philosophy, and like the book's been a part of this, and the acid trip is a part of this, is the book's been a very good practice in me not going, no, that doesn't make sense. Because where everybody comes from when they talk about the book and they work on the book and the things they see in the book and the way they perceive it, like Kevin seems to chart it by its battles.
Yeah, he does.
It's big events, what moves the lines, so to speak.
The conflict of it, yeah.
Eris charts it by its individual discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
When things are revealed in the story, that's the world moving. And Alistair charts it by his own personal relationships. That the strength of those is what reinforces them, the lack of those is what causes him to snap. That's been a very good practice in me not looking at people and going, that's wrong, or that doesn't make sense, because everybody's charting the changes in their life in the world and in the book differently.
Right.
That if you haven't learned their math, you can't quantify their statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just been weird.
Have you, when it comes to, well, wrapping it back to the book, when it comes to the writing, the book, I should say, your role you described as kind of dynamite.
Yes.
You're there to problem solve. You're the guy. You're the go-to guy. Ship's about to blow up. We go to you and we're like, "What do we do?" And you're like, "Well, there's theories," and you're the guy that helps us through the situation. That's what you feel like is a big contributing part of yours.
Yep.
Not only that, but you kind of describe it as this element for exploration for yourself to see who other people are. And as of right now, you have these two other dudes that like are totally separate from you, live totally different lives up until, let's just say 2015, 16. That's when we finally all kind of almost came together. When it comes to your future goals with just the book, like your role, what do you see that being? Do you see it changing? Do you see it evolving? Do you see it, you're like the lore master? You know what I mean? Like, do you want to go further? You want to take it different areas?
That's difficult. It's a difficult one to answer because specifically the book has kind of happened to me much like my own life has happened to me. And at this point in my life, I don't feel like a terribly active element. I'm practicing being more of one, and in the book, that's why, like the last few sessions, we've been like, hey, let's really figure out some history. Let's hardline some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then be like, okay, no, this is the case. And that's where I was like, all right, I need to, what the fuck are these people's names? What do their names mean? And I had to come up with a solution to that and things like that. Because much like my own life, started doing the thruple thing that was largely on my suggestion. That was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, I feel like a secondary character to their lives.
Mm.
And I'm working on not being that. And in the book, similarly, I'm working on not being that, but I'm afraid if I go too far into not just reacting, but trying to manifest a reality from zero, that it will not be good. I don't feel practiced in creating good things.
Confidence-wise or ability-wise?
Subconscious motivation-wise.
Okay. Like, is this something that do you feel like you want to explore things and you just feel like a little trapped? Or or like, like, I just don't want to step on toes here? Or is it purely, as you're describing it, not quite being motivated to finding that place yet?
In my life, I feel like a bad person pretending to be a good person. In the book, I feel like a bad lore master, so to speak, pretending to be a good one.
Really?
I'm hoping that I pretend to be a good one long enough that I just am.
Do you not see that it could be confidence, though? Because to me, you're the best one. That's why I go to you. You're way better than me at that stuff.
It could be confidence. It's weird, because my big defense in life has always been my own assurement of my abilities to do things. Moved out of my parents' house at 18. From then on, I was dead convinced I needed nobody's help. I was wrong, but nonetheless, I made it. And things like that. I don't feel like I deal with people very well, and yet somehow I live with 2 women and sleep with both.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have some skill to be able to pull that off and keep all that in place, and nonetheless, I feel like I'm bad at it. So confidence is definitely an element. I'm just not sure what shape my confidence is actually in.
Okay.
That's something I was never able to discern.
The shape of the confidence, like where it leans, it's kind of, what is it called? It's morality?
Yeah.
Something like that? Or is it more like more unknown? Like, I don't know what it can be, what it is, and where it stands? Or is it, I don't want to explore what it truly could be?
More of the second one. I'm confident enough to do things and not confident enough to feel like I am doing them well. I have been cutting wood in my backyard for 3 days. I am not a woodsman.
Yeah. Well, but that also is a lot of us, right? Whereas, like, I agree, like, in my level of it, which would be, I don't feel like a writer is one thing out of fucking thousands. I can give you everything. Every time, you know, like, this is just my little story. When I come to writing here, I'm always so angry at myself that I can't just, like, be like you and just, like, I'll just power through and I'll make these things. Right? I feel like I get hung up. Like, but, like, exactly how do you spell it? But what does the mountain kind of look like? You know, like, how many rivers run through that land? Like, I get hung up on all this stupid shit. I can never bypass it. I can't do it. I just, or like, what shirt is he wearing? You know, or like, why does he feel the way he does? He's so mad in this scene. Why is he really mad? I gotta know that. I can't be like, well, you know, he's just pissed because he got his foot stepped on. Like, yeah, there's gotta be more than that. And I'm like that as a human being, just in the real world, where I'm just like, there's more. There's way more to this, and I need to know. And my problem is I hyperfixate on shit. I have zero confidence in my writing. I have a little, like, I'll read it back, like, wow, that's impressive, you know, sometimes, but I'm not really, I don't think I'm a writer. Just as you don't think you're whatever you are in your life. Like I'm not that. I'm doing it out of necessity. Because out of the three of us, like, this is my start, so I probably should be the one that writes it. You know what I mean? If I form the team, I gotta fucking be the one that's gonna write it, right. Correct? So I'm only doing it out of that, and I don't want to explore certain elements of that myself. And that's just the writing. We're not even talking about like my personal relationships or my work relationships or whatever it is, or my fucking the way I feel about my family, that fucking mess. I also agree, like, with you that I'm like, dude, I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. And of course, that's adulthood, right? That's all it is. I mean, once you hit 30, it's like, oh, it makes a little bit more sense, but you still feel like you're adrift in the fucking ocean, yeah, the dark.
I think it was Joe Rogan who said at some point you realize we're all just babies who grew up.
Yeah.
And like you're a kid, you look at adults and you're like, oh man, someday the world's all gonna make sense. And then one day you're standing in line for groceries and you're like, wait a minute.
I'm still trying to figure this out. Yeah, it's almost like you think there's a level, but it's just that, well, there is, but it doesn't end. And like with your abilities in the book, I mean, I actually just made a video of it. I was like, there are times where I feel like, man, if those guys just got together, they'd do this way better than me. Because I feel like half the time I'm just sitting here waiting for someone smarter than me to tell me something. And I'm like, okay, Jacob said to do this. That's what we're going to do. Because I totally just trust in the ability of your guys' skills. And like, though you may not feel it in yourself, to me, it's divine. Every time I'm so stuck on something. I'm so hung up, or I'll write myself to a stupid corner. You know, I feel like you can actually help me get out of that corner and write me on the path again to break down about a mile and need help again. To me, your abilities are incredibly resourceful to yourself and to this situation, this book.
Well, and the credit you got to give yourself is I can't make the corners. You can.
The corners?
Yeah. Yeah, you can make the path.
Right.
I can only follow it.
That's true.
Because of course you get lost. You're building a fucking road. There isn't one there for you to follow. Jesus Christ. If you asked me to build a road to Clinton right now and got rid of all the ones that were there, I'd be like, what the fuck? What's in the way? Like, actually, this is a subdivision. Shit. Why do they make houses in circles? Can we get rid of one? No, it's integral to the community. Fuck, dude.
Around.
Everybody go back.
It's like we're all a team building forward, and I wonder that then, do you feel, well, you don't, it sounds like you don't feel like you're contributing in that aspect as of late. I believe it was the wording you used, like you don't feel like you're there, or whatever, however you want to word it. And Kevin kind of expresses the same thing, and so do I, honestly. I feel like I'm not providing enough. It's interesting where we all sit. So for you, knowing that you're an integral part, knowing that you're the one that It's like if okay, like let's say that I'm building the road there, right? By by my own vision. You're the one that's got the map though. You know what I mean? That like I'm mapping it out. You're just looking like, well, you tried this area before. We can't go there. Remember the hill? There's iron and shit. Like, oh, okay. Like you're actually helping me be. I don't know any terms.
I think maybe the book is suffering from the same convolution that our life is suffering from as we get older, which is horseshit.
Yeah.
In his life, you're like, what does a character do in this position? And we're all like, honestly, I just take a beer, get in the shower, and cry. So, who fucking knows? I think about how my dad would yell at me right now.
That's what he's doing.
That's what's happening.
He's a failure. I forgot.
Fuck.
I really think that for me, you guys are integral to this. I don't even see it as my book. I just see it as like I'm the one who's holding on to it, like my room. Like this is just. I got my own little room. Like if I were gonna move, I need an office for just a fucking book. There's a shrine to the book in here. You look around, like everything's like involved to the book, and it's like. In my world, I feel like I don't know how to word this correctly, but I suffer every day because of this book. Because it's always on my mind. I'm always sitting there like, okay, where can I go? I take breaks and stuff, but I'll still be like, wait a minute, maybe Eris is going to actually go here instead. And it's just always this shit. I'm listening to myself talk about the book at work when I'm supposed to be focusing there. I come home and just stare at the screen or like stare at the map and just like plan things out. Like, okay, like, is that a valley or no? You know what I mean? I'm always constantly just deeply enveloped in this stuff. And I made that video. I'm like, I wonder if those guys feel trapped too. Like, not maybe trapped in a horrible negative way, but if you guys also kind of feel so weighted from it. Like almost like leery, right before you step in, you kind of like dip your toe to see if it's too cold, kind of thing. Like I don't know.
Deep breath.
Do you ever feel that way with it, where it's getting to the point where it feels a little intense? It's a little bit much sometimes, or
yeah, and there's. So I have a problem with if I make the book work, it becomes exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I'll make progress on it, but then I hate it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we come up with like all the Southern cults and stuff. That was work. That sucked. Or I make the book fun, and then I've played too much Total War, and I have to stop myself from trying to make the South win everything all the time.
Right.
Because when I play video games or I do things that are fun, I want to win. That's fun is winning.
Mm-hmm.
But the book's not about fun. The book's not about winning. So it's like I have to find this halfway point between the South consolidating its forces for Alistair's story to continue and marching north for his struggles and his morality to be strained, but also like that's like a good example of this is we sacked one of the 3 great cities on the points of the fucking not North Ansar Bay. North Ansar Bay is just a bay, but the fucking big river.
Yeah.
Between the Heartlands, Lyria, whatever, we sacked Lyria, but did it mean anything? No. This is like when you take your enemy's capital in Total War and they take it right back.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's the balance. That's the balance. There was a moment of victory there, but it has to ultimately be met with, yeah, but what did you really do, asshole?
Mm-hmm. What I would say, because I face that every single day, is the battle between wanting to escape there and having to work there.
Yes.
It's just like there are times where you just want to go there and it's fun. It's what you made.
Yep.
And you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to have fun in it. But then there's those times where it's like, but I personally will say, like, I got to go there and I got to fucking, who are the Valakmir?
And I have to be responsible about it, and I have to provide answers.
Treating the lore respectfully. I can't just make something up and you're like, well, you can't do that because we already... It is hard.
And this is how God feels, and this is why he doesn't talk to us anymore.
Yeah. And it's so tiring. I will have literal headaches after working sessions by myself. And I'm just sitting there like, got a whole fucking headache, and I can't do anything the rest of the day, and my life is this room. I struggle with the exact same thing. I want this to be fun, and it can be when I'm physically seeing the world. I'm looking at the maps and I'm just imagining the story. But then I'm always thinking like, I gotta fucking write that. Like I'm planning right now the story of Odysseus, the snake in the portal, and it's causing me that fucking headaches. Because it's fun to kind of like look through, like, oh, this is cool, like this is what's gonna happen. But I know I'm gonna have to sit the fuck down and like type it all out. Thousands of words, and then what did he do? Why did he do that? And I'm gonna be so tired from it. I think that's where you sit too. And I think that is a balance to be found that if I had a fucking like cheat code, I'd give it to you. For me, it's like I kind of tell myself like you are doing it today. This is a work day. You work 5 days a week and you get 2 off of the book. And you have full-time jobs, so some of the days are really short, like 2 hours. But when you're off on Tuesday, you're working 8 hours on the book. And that's what I had to do, to force myself to kind of do it. And I was able to solve a lot of problems that way. And I was able to, like you're like, one time you're like, who the fuck are the people, who are these fucking people? And I'm like, I got it, I already took care of it. It took me a month, but I figured out all these people. And I know who they are and I know their history. It was not easy. In fact, it was like headache inducing. And sometimes you think, oh, this country is going to be the hardest because they're brand new. And then also they're the easiest.
Yeah,
there's
nothing predisposed.
Yeah. Dubois was like the most difficult one to do.
Yep.
For some reason. But like the Valakmir, you've never even heard of them. And I was like, this was like, oh man, I wrote thousands of years of their history. It was so easy.
It was fun.
I was actually those ones. But then it's like some of them sucked assholes. Because then, like, these guys, the Willandium, like, they're, like, fucking near these guys, and they got those fuckers. It's a whole ass thing. They're kind of wedged, and I don't like those people. But that's Aya's people, you know? Like, they're important. They're integral. Their story truly matters. But I do know, going back to it, I do know your struggle with it. And hence why I don't bother you guys about it. And I try not to, like, anytime we hang out, like, I try not to make it about book, but it always ends up being, because that's where my mind is. I can't help but, like, you know, what would Alistair do here now that I got you? You know, what would he really do? It's impossible. And for me, I don't feel like I'm truly waiting on you guys. I just respect your guys' stuff. I don't want to fuck with it. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it's literally blank. I'm like, I don't know their history. And I'm not going to start making things up because I might fuck their shit up. I have no idea. I could. Give me time. I could figure something out, but it's not that vital. And if they have anything they want to mention, I'm going to write it down. You know what I mean? If you say, hey, I figured out in the year 500 this happened. Okay, I'll write that down. We got that in the timeline. Just so when we go back, we're not going to get tongue-tied and be like, wait a minute, weren't you here?
I might as well if you're going to take a picture of that fucking timeline. If I don't, I'm gonna go. At least this way I can stare at the picture while I play video games and it'll pop into my head and I'll neurotically scribble about something.
And obviously, just I got everyone else's too. I mean, this is only Mankind's. I was doing Lyria, but I said fuck it.
The fucking Lyria.
Fuck the goddamn elves right now.
Yeah. What's their history? Oh, they got really good at stuff and they sat around and did nothing for like 10,000 years because they're boring as shit. Fuck elves.
They do have some fucked up history, though.
I believe it, they're elves.
I would say, for me, what you guys are doing is obviously crucial to helping me out. You know, if I'm, you know, driving the vehicle that's creating the roads, well, you guys are helping me navigate this. You know, keep me grounded, but also help me kind of come off the ground a bit, you know, to see above the trees. And I couldn't do this alone at this point. And it doesn't feel like it ever should have been done alone. I'm so glad that it was instinctual to say, like, no, like, people should help. This should be a whole thing. It should be a whole ass thing.
Every Tolkien has a C.S. Lewis.
Or more. I got a couple. I got lucky. I totally get how you feel about it, though. And I don't hold anything where, like, I'm expecting stuff. If anything, I try to push and say, no, you can write. Or no, you can do this, and blah, 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 because that's what I expect you guys to do for me. You know, if I'm sitting here like, oh, I can't, because I fucking suck, I would expect you guys like, what are you talking about? You know, like, we do that for each other to help us move to the next step, and my thing I always got bothered by was I don't want to feel like I'm forcing people to do stuff, or like, like, oh, I'm doing it because he really wants this and to be helpful. I always have a shame. I've talked to Kelly about this a lot. I'm always really ashamed to ask for help, and I'm very ashamed of being really happy, or I feel very shameful if I'm wanting something from people. I just feel super guilty, even if it's small. I've never borrowed money from anyone before because I was like, there's no way I could ever do that. I would be so ashamed of myself. Or, in my darkest times mentally, I never asked anyone to help me because I'm like, I'm too ashamed. I don't want them to look at me that way. I can take care of this. And I always have that thing whenever with this book, I'm like, I don't want you guys, I'm like, oh, I feel so ashamed. Like, I hope they don't feel like they have to do this. And I hope they don't want, maybe I'll see if I can push them out. And then maybe that's what they really want. You end up pushing away what you need the most.
Yeah.
And that's been my struggle in my life for years and years. And so that's why I don't like bother a lot about it. Or we don't talk for about a month or however fucking long it's been. I didn't talk to Billy for about 6 months. Just forgot, or like, I don't talk to Kevin, he lives right over there. I could like see him in his window. And I
think those are the marks of stable friendship, though, where you just come and go and be like, hey, shit's busy, I'm gonna go for a while, but I'll be back.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, it is.
Okay, Dad.
we just kind of like, but when we all get together, it's fine. And we have issues before, and we've, things have happened, and things have gotten difficult, or our own lives individually got a little bit more than we thought it was going to be. But with you, it sounds like you just don't feel in control. You feel like you're secondary to other people's experiences.
Yeah.
And that bothers me in a way, not only because I care about you, but I want to make sure that you feel like you're not, like, in what I can control, which is our friendship and which is our book. There's only two things I can control about that feeling, but I know that you're not secondary to it. I know that, honestly, I feel like it's your, you know what I mean? Like, I have a whole different perspective than you have about the book, but
it's weird because, long time, small, angry white man, I'm 127 pounds still. But one of the things I had to realize is this isn't something that's being done to me so much as I have done it to myself as a security measure. And I really had to break that feeling down because, like, one of the things I realized, I'm fucking good at it. I'm really good. I'm decent at reacting to things rather than creating things. But unfortunately, what I found as I've gotten older is that is not conducive to situations playing out
on the fly.
In a healthy, productive way. Because sometimes you're reacting to dog shit.
Yeah.
And dog shit does not care how hard you're trying. It's just gonna stay the way it is.
That makes sense.
And so, as a life skill, I've really had to start practicing doing instead of waiting for things to be done. And hopefully that carries over the book well enough, and I can just walk in and be like, yeah, so by the way, the capital, and then just fucking have something on the fly. Or this is the source of the seeing stones, and what the purple stones do, and what the stone circles are good for. That's when we were talking about.
Oh, I remember that.
The souls of kings trapped in the stones.
Yeah.
That's some shit where I'm like, I need to come up with something. Like, the circle of stones can't be as mysterious as Stonehenge.
So that brings me to, like, a question. How do you do this? How does your process work? What are your tools? What are your assets? And, like, what does it take for you? You know what I mean?
Well, I don't drink anymore, so I have to think really hard.
What are your tools? As in, like, computer, a notebook, or, like, whatever it is. Like, do you have a tool that you're able to get this out with?
So, for me, it's mostly imagery. And music. Music because it captures the feeling of something very, very well.
Yeah, that seems to be the main one.
If I can match something to a song, because my problem is when I start to write it down, it becomes blood, germs, and steel.
Explain.
All the magic disappears.
Okay.
I for whatever reason, when I write it down, Like when I write, if I were to write down what the Stones were, it'd be a list of things that they do.
I love it though.
Yeah.
I want that so bad. I want to frame that. But anyway, go ahead.
And it's like after the fact, if we write it down, that's probably a good thing. Doing it in the process, I've noticed as I write things down, I slowly bring them back down to earth. It's like I'm bringing them to me, I'm not going to them.
Yeah, of course.
And that fucks me up. So that's why I've been really dependent on music to capture the feelings of things. Because if I can't capture the mechanics of it, I can capture the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And the tone of these magical things is much more significant to the narrative than the mechanics.
Yes, and I know exactly where you feel that way because that's all I fucking do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's all ethereal. It's all here. It's magical. But then when you got to go in here and you got to like make lists of things, you got to like visualize it. You got to talk about it in extensive detail. You are making it real, and you are taking.
And it's almost like you can't play with it anymore.
Yeah,
you can't have fun with it.
It's true. It's very true. But I got to a point personally. I felt the same where I was like, you know what? But it's got to be. No more can it float. It had its time. It festered in my mind for years. I played out every avenue I want, and I chose the right one, and it's going to be written down. Who's to say there's not an alternate reality, but still.
Also, I was thinking about it earlier. The guys in the very southeastern corner of the South that are a threat, and everybody's kind of like weary of.
Down here.
Oh, I'm getting a call. Why? Not right now. Giants. Aeonic Giants. Aeonic Giants. Like 9 feet tall, don't have eyes or mouths. They got like kind of divots through their faces. They're like half a creation. Just giants.
Who are they? Like a creation of like one of the Aeons?
One of them.
Okay.
One of the Aeons who came down and were trying to undo what the Titans did.
Do you need pictures of anything? Because, by the way, this is important things, like when people were born, here's the Aeon, here's who they created, these are all the Anaku tribes, those are all the Titans.
What is the best angle for me? I'll actually do them straight up. That's probably smarter. Thank God the camera quality on this thing is good. I get a picture of all of this just in case.
Story of Odysseus. Yeah, I'm gonna need help on that one, I'm gonna be honest. Whatever you need, yeah. I mean, there's the family lines that we began, and you want to get the original map, names. That's the story that we worked on.
Okay, these I've got in my head. Yes. Yes. This just because I haven't seen it before. Those because they're pretty.
Anytime you need to, I had documents in here. I mean, this is like, this is just people in this one. So like, if you ever need information or tools, I can help you out with that. As in your own map, or as in fucking whatever else it takes. I tried a typewriter to see, and it does help be creative because it's tactile. And then I realized that, oh no, this is where it's at. This keyboard, because it keeps me locked in and all that. I feel like I'm creating. I feel the creation. I don't like typing on a silent little keyboard. That's just because I'm weird about that shit.
No, I definitely plan on getting a typewriter just because they're neat. You know?
Yeah. And honestly, you can take this and just mark shit down as needed. That's like a rough draft anyway. It's not. I have 3 more right here.
Okay. Cool.
Just so you can kind of see where we're at, and then you can fucking message me like, "What were you guys doing 7:32?" I'm like, "Oh fuck," and then because I got it over here where I only stopped at a certain point, and then I'll kind of let you know, and I'll talk to Kevin because that's where I get stuck. Like, what the fuck were they doing? But for me, the reason I asked about your tools and all that stuff is like, if you have something, if you have a computer that, like for me, like this computer I didn't buy for gaming, it's secondary. It's for the book and everything in it. And this is my main tool, but like I needed a printer for the shit. I needed a filing cabinet for all the fucking documents I print off, or I have all my journals over here and they truly matter. They're not just fucking cute little things. Like
my journals are full of inane ramblings.
so yeah, that's what these are too. But sometimes there's cool stuff in it, like what the lore is.
Oh yeah, that's
Or
the
other
whole story
times
of Dove came from one of my fucking binge nights when I was like back when we were living in Clinton. I was shit faced and just like, you know what, Dove.
That's the best thing that ever happened to this book. That was what took the book from the ground to the air. And I've talked about it a few times, but to me, that moment when I stumbled upon it, you were in Texas, and Kevin, we weren't really hanging out a lot. I was alone. You know, I still lived alone in that apartment when you moved out. I think I lived alone for about 6 to 8 months. It was just me. And it was a little lonely, but I would kind of go through things, and I was like, I gotta work on the book. Like, I gotta get my mind off of stuff. And I just found one of your journals. I was like, oh, oops. Let's see if I'll hold on to it for him. And I saw that page. I was like, Dove, Dizarine, what is tan? What is all this shit? And it was Tan and Tantorum. I was like, wait a minute, Tan and Tantorum, and he's like taking people out of the forest. What if it's the origin of mankind? And it was a whole thing. It was a whole, like, it created the book would not have, there would be no such thing as Odysseus Tan and Tanias and all the timeline shit wouldn't exist.
Yeah,
But because of that one little thing.
I remember you told me, like, we found this thing, and I was like, I have no fucking clue what that is.
But that's the beauty of this, and why I encourage you to, just have your notebooks, and like these are all my old ones. These are only half of them, but I have all the notebooks from the books and shit that, like, whenever I'm stuck, I'll just like go through, and you can see, like, I'll just go through and be like, ooh, this is when I mentioned that looks like similar to when I mentioned it here, and then I was able to pinpoint exactly where the man was standing because of all the years of it. Because I know that you and your own time can add more whenever you feel you're ready, whenever you feel like you need to expound on things. But we're getting to the point where, like, when you play that one online game that all the kids love, where they're all shooting each other, Fortnite, it's getting smaller. Like, we were going to start collecting things, and meaning we can't have any more mystery. Because, like, I'm moving forward. The first book is written.
Yeah.
It's ready.
We need, at least as for the writing, we need the answers.
Because book 2, it takes place no longer in areas that are just mine. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, it's okay, it's the Murphos. Like, I'll just write what I want. They don't have any stake in the Murphos. They just know it exists. So who cares what I put there? But book 2, Quinlan's going to be a thing. I'm going to be writing about Quinlan. He's in Illyria. I can't just be like, well, Illyria is just a place, and it's kind of like, just think of this. Can't do that anymore. We're going to be talking about the South. We're going to be talking about Tantorum. I can't, there's no more, like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
What is Valakmir? I don't know. It's just a place. Like, we can't do it unless it lore-wise makes sense.
The place, what's there? Well, geez.
A couple guys and maybe a midget. I don't know.
Yeah. His name is Tim.
That's why I had 2 eyes. I don't like this guy already. Yeah,
It's actually Tihin.
It's him. The H is silent, and he'll tell you that too.
Yep.
But we're definitely getting to that point where this is like I don't like doing it either, but we have to write everything down now. But I do understand the trepidation of, like, but now it can't be ethereal. It can't have this magical element, and
If it's written down, it's done growing.
And that's how I feel about Eris's story. I'm like, there's no more, like, well, maybe he doesn't die. You know? Like, I can't.
Maybe he's Batman.
Like, I want to believe that that's not going to happen. It won't happen. It won't happen. But it will. And I kind of had to come to terms with that. My main guy dies. You know? But it's okay. Or, like, countries can't just be, I don't knows. And, like, and that's why I encourage, like, we're getting to that point where we're...
And it's scary because we've put this much work into just developing this, and this is a fucking space the size of Europe. And it's like we've got a much bigger space on the left side of the map.
There's Elandria, and then there's
So he was like, hey, we were thinking about making a role-playing game based off your book. What's over here? And we're just like, Jesus fucking Christ.
There's a guy there, and there's 3 kids, and maybe a midget, and 14 individual women, but they are all chastity women.
Yes.
And
But there is also a nut cave where all the lonely men go.
That's it.
It's a pool.
Have at it, dude. I know, there's 2 continents. Like that world map concept, I'm like, no. That's way too much. Well, that's when I imagined our little area was like England. I was like, oh, it's just like a little England. But now our place is like, nope, it's like the size of Europe.
It's a big enough place for a wealth of cultural diversity. Even Dubois is technically a confederation.
Right, they are.
Of multiple groups of people.
Yeah.
Picture if some Germans, the French, and some of the Spanish got on the same team, but then didn't immediately fracture because the French are racist.
Yeah, honestly, that's kind of Dubois.
And then the southern kingdoms, take England, put it next to Italy, and make some Moors move there.
That makes sense.
And that's what you got. And then Tantorum, just picture Germany without any diversity.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's honestly it.
Which sounds weird, because they had the whole Nazis thing, and you'd be like, don't they not have any diversity in the first place? No, they did! They did quickly after, too. They're pretty the center of the fucking world, as far as they're concerned.
And they really are. It's amazing what we had to do with Tantorum to make it move.
Yeah.
They're not going to believe in magic, and they're going to be like Nazis. Okay.
Yeah.
They got to be a bad guy, and no one's really the bad guy in this story. Do you have any goals? You know, like I always think it was like baby step goals to get to the major goals. Do you have any goals book-wise that you're wanting to
I
set up?
still have no clue what to do with Geralt and Marion. Geralt's kind of like a he's a kamikaze.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's going to be the end of his line, is he's going to throw himself at something too big and too important.
Okay.
But I realized this when I wrote just a little bit about them, and it sucked. So I didn't save it. But as I was writing it, I went, okay, hold on. Marion's as much of a character as Geralt is. Marion, he is very emotional. He's very motivated. He's wiser than Geralt and Alistair in his own way. I also didn't settle on the name Marion. That's just been filling this entire time. I gotta find a name better for him.
I think that sounds good. Or just Marin.
Marion might be better. I like that.
Um,
Because he's just...
Is this something that you want to do solo? You got this? Or do you want to make a time where we can work on something?
We could make a time where we work on something.
We'll schedule a session here. I'll get all the whiteboards cleared and we can just hammer it out.
Yeah, because Geralt and Alistair have a lot in common. Like, those two characters to me represent everything you, me, and Kevin have in common. But those two to Marin is everything we don't. Marin's not a doer, but Marin is, whereas Geralt and Alistair both represent kind of an impulsiveness. Marin is a contrast to that, and that's why outside of his presence, those two are very chaotic and very destructive.
I already have a million questions. Okay, so here's what we can do. We can call the interview all set, get some food, call the date set, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
We could call the interview done again, get some food, come back and just dip our toe a little bit, just to, because I have a lot of questions for, like you, to be able to help. I'm like, well, then what's Marion's? Is there a hierarchy? Like, what are the ages of these people? Like, I have a million questions before I can really start pinpointing.
You want to eat pizza rolls and watch me cut wood and ask me questions about characters?
I could.
That sounds like it would be productive. That sounds like it would be... Because Marin's not a warrior. Maybe if I'm cutting wood, maybe something will come to me about him.